Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, a Pittsburgh Steelers podcast made by fans like you, for fans like you. Now, here's your host, Joe Kuzma.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. I am your host, Joe Kuzma, and I hope everyone enjoyed their Memorial Day holiday weekend. I sure did, as I caught up with one of my good friends. You'll see me always chatting back and forth on Twitter with Eric Herrmann of SteelersGrind.com. Runs his own blog and site over there, and is also a contributor over at SteelCityUnderground.com. And Eric put out this really interesting article about maybe a week and a half ago, and we decided to get together and talk about that. And that would be some potential free agent signings the Steelers may be looking at here heading into this 2016 season that is just about 100 days away until we get some football. Check out this interesting conversation me and Eric had over the holiday weekend.
Hello, Steelers fans. I'm here with Eric Herrmann, a contributor to the Steel City Underground website and also a blogger on his own website, SteelersGrind.com. Eric, how you doing today?
I'm good, Joe. Thanks for having me on today.
And thank you for all your patience. What most of you don't see or hear when offline here is that I've been playing around with my equipment for the last hour, and Eric has been patient enough on this holiday weekend to take time out of his schedule to speak to me and speak to all of us about one of the articles that he wrote just recently that actually I had a lot of interest in. It was 5 potential late free agent signings that the Steelers could make. And we have a few on here that are very interesting, but do you want to take the lead here, Eric, and give us a few of the first names?
Yeah, so the first guy in this article is, as I said in my article, the most obvious candidate, and that's Will Allen. He's a guy a lot of writers have had said, like, oh, he's on speed dial for Tomlin, oh, he's keeping him in his back pocket. Because he's a vet with the team. He did really well last season. It's kind of weird looking at his stats, too, because he actually has, like, statistically best season last year at age 32 in his 11th season.
Yeah, and I think Will Allen would turn 33 here shortly, either before the season, during the season. I thought he had like a September or October birth date, but that's another one of those guys where I think, and I'm sure you've heard me say this and write about this too, is I do think that Will Allen is, like you said, one of these guys that's on speed dial. He's going to be. I think what they're going to do is they're going to see what they have with some of the college free agents they have in camp right now, and some of the obviously the rookies are going to be there. The guys they drafted like Sean Davis and that they're not getting cut unless they're they'd have to be very terrible, like the worst picks ever. But kind of like a guy like Shamarko Thomas, I really still think that they're just kind of chewing on what they're going to do with Shamarko, and if Shamarko is going to end up getting cut or isn't cutting it, kind of like what we saw with the defensive lineman when they brought Brett Kiesel back in maybe 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, at this point, Shamarko's a special teamer. There's nobody thinking he's going to compete for a starting position or get playing time. I mean, I remember even last season, he'd come on a few plays and he'd blitz from the side, completely miss the guy. He can't process the game very fast. So just let him run down the field, make a tackle on special teams, and
well, he can't even do that either. I think he had like 2 penalties last season where he was like in that halo that you have to leave on punt returns.
Yeah, in his face and trying to scare him.
Yeah, bumps the guy, bumps the returner, and he's just, if you can't even play special teams, I don't think there's going to be a spot for him. And as you said, I think Will Allen had 4 sacks last year. He was he's been extremely effective the last 2 seasons where they use him as a blitzer in these different schemes that Keith Butler's running. So how about another name on the list here besides Will Allen, since we're both obviously fond of him coming back maybe?
One of the next guys on my list is a player who was actually never with the Steelers. That's guard Sean Hickey. And he's a player I'm sure many have not heard of because he's going into his second year in the NFL, has just bounced around rosters. But the reason he's on my list is because he was a guy the Steelers brought in for a pre-draft visit and showed some interest in. So I feel like because the Steelers kind of had that situation with Ross Cockrell almost, because they brought him in for pre-draft visits, showed some interest, and when he was available, they signed him. So I feel like Hickey could almost be, if they have guys start going down because I'm sure you remember last offseason, I think they had one preseason game, they lost like 3 offensive line within like 2-minute span, and you never know with injuries. He could be a good kind of depth guy. You never know. He could just be a flyer, and I could get lucky and make a prediction.
Yeah, kind of like Chris Hubbard, who that'll be another topic for another day. But Chris, Chris on and off the practice squad, and
exactly.
Injuries an opportunity always. So yeah, and of course the Patriots took a look at Hickey, right, and the Patriot way and everything like that. So obviously, if it's somebody coming off of one of those rosters, there might be more interest for him there. Then, speaking of phone calls, weren't we just talking about that?
Yeah, just parents and wives and phones and.
Yeah, it's the holiday weekend, so I'm lucky I'm getting through this without my phone buzzing over here too. So, but talking about the Patriots, this isn't like a guy that got cut off the Browns or something like that. It's actual, Super Bowl contending type team. As much as it pains me to admit that at times. That could be somebody that potentially the Steelers look at. Another guy you had on your list too was a defensive end, Alex Carrington.
Yeah, and he's kind of like Sean Hickey too. He's kind of a stretch, as I mentioned in my article. But the reason he got in was last year when he was a free agent. The Steelers brought him in for a visit, but he left without a contract signing. And this is we kind of seen with guys this preseason. I think Jason Jones, the end from the Lions, he came in, left without a contract. That's basically a sign that if you don't stay in Pittsburgh and get signed, you're not being signed. But what I like about him is he's kind of a veteran, and if you look at the Steelers' defensive line depth, for like their nickel packages and defensive tackles, they have good depth now that they have Ricardo Matthews. They drafted Javon Hargrave, who's going to be really good for us, hopefully. But if you look at kind of their 5 techniques, their 3-4 ends, they have Tuitt and Cam, whom I love. But behind them, they have Cash Lyons, LT Walton. They just have a lot of question marks and young guys, and he could be a good like veteran guy. Not like at the level of like Brett Kiesel, but he could be a good, like, if we need a late vet, maybe bring him in.
Yeah. I'm wondering if it was somebody that had interest in. It's kind of, I just wonder because sometimes with the salary cap, people just think, hey, we could sign these guys, sign that guy, and we're going to be talking about that in a second with another one of these players that was released by another team, and they've already paid him. He got that money that just that minimum didn't even last with the team for 2 months. So you got to remember that some part of the salary cap too is that these players, if you have injuries, you're still playing and you still have guys like Sean Sweesham, he was still counted against the cap last year, even though he didn't play a regular season game, and they have to replace him. So they have to have money for a guy like a Chris Boswell. So it isn't necessarily that they don't have interest in like somebody like Alex Carrington. It's just that they can't. It's the Will Allen thing all over again. They can't, earmark that money right up front for a guy that's probably going to end up just if he makes the roster or somebody else doesn't make the roster. So, what was the other one I was going to say about that? Oh yeah, when you show some interest, and this has happened with, like you said, Ross Cockrell, but Ladarius Green's another guy that's just like that too, where that's somebody that they had interest in maybe 4 years ago, and they even publicly admitted it now after signing him as a free agent. So they're still playing like that, cat and mouse type game where they don't let teams even know what you're doing until, okay, now we have this guy signed. Yeah, we liked him the whole time, even though some of that's kind of hyperbole. I think they're just going to say they like a guy regardless. You're not going to sign a guy and then say, oh no, you know what, he sucks. So who's another name you have on your list there, Eric?
Well, we have another Steeler vet. It's wide receiver Lance Moore.
Oh boy.
Yeah, he was a weird signing because if you look at his like time in New Orleans, he had some really good seasons. He had one season he got over 1,000 yards. He had 2 seasons with 8 touchdowns. So in theory, he should have done really well for us. But for some reason, he kind of just never had chemistry with Ben Roethlisberger. He kind of fought with Marcus Wheaton and Jericho Cotchery for time. I don't know. He just kind of never worked out for us. I think we had Jericho Cotchery when we had him.
You know what? He was the replacement for Jericho Cotchery. Yeah.
Yes, you're right.
And he missed some time right out the gate at the beginning of that season. He was injured and he just couldn't get on the field. And then by the time he did get on the field, I think I remember it was the Cleveland Browns game because I was actually there watching the game when we got like spanked. And Lance Moore, had like one hit him in the face mask and then another one like right off his fingers. Oh man, it was just so miserable. And then And then of all things, he scores the only touchdown in that game for Pittsburgh. And he like celebrates like, he's going to be on Dancing with the Stars like AB or something. It's like, hey guy, look at the scoreboard. I mean, I got Browns fans around me just, ragging on me about the same thing. I say, hey, you know what? That guy just needs to look at the scoreboard. It was a very humbling moment for me to be in Cleveland. And it wasn't quite like last year's game where I'm standing there. You hear that the Jets lost and the whole place has been invaded by Steelers fans. It was just, it's just a whole different experience. But Lance Moore, I just don't personally, I don't see that ever happening. I mean, they could extend the olive branch there just because he's a guy that's a veteran, but it's still going to be the same type of situation that he was complaining about a few years ago, where you have a rookie like Martavis Bryant, and then you're going to end up, he's going to end up sitting on the bench behind like a Sammy Coates and even Darius Hayward-Bay, and of course Wheaton and Antonio Brown. He's going to be like the fourth or fifth guy off the bench if he's lucky. It's pretty much the situation he was in when he was here the first time. He complained about it, and the Steelers, surprisingly, they were like, hey, we don't want this guy on our roster. He's not happy. He doesn't want to be here. So they still got rid of him, even though they still owed him a little bit of money from the previous, that other year on his contract. So who's our final guy on here? I already know the answer to this, and anyone who's probably read the article on SteelCityUnderground.com, but it seems like this name always finds a way into my podcasts or articles.
I don't know. I don't know if everyone's not talking about this guy, Brandon Boykin, of course.
Yeah.
I was actually kind of worried when I posted this article because I think I posted it on a Friday or Saturday, and there were reports that he was visiting with the Falcons that Monday. So I was kind of worried that, I'll post this article. It's going to be irrelevant. But, hey, he went to the Falcons. He didn't leave with a contract, so
yeah,
you never know.
And that's a team that's defensive back poor. You saw them go after one of the Steelers prospects in Keon O'Neal out of Florida. That was their first-round draft choice, the safety out of Florida. And, yeah, they've pretty much had the same problems we've had with their secondary when it comes to the secondary. And so for a player like Boykin to show up there and a division opponent, too. He was with the Carolina Panthers and then leaves and then gets some interest from the Falcons, and the Falcons just kind of passed on that. I find that very interesting.
And their second-round pick from Jalen Collins, who they drafted in the second round, pretty sure he got suspended for the first 4 games or so.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
You'd think they'd want more cornerback depth.
Yeah, especially for a team that needs it. So, I mean, they have Trufant, and, he's a stud, but outside of that, they need some help there. So, again, as I've said many, many times, obviously something wrong with this situation, either the player or, something off the field or on the field or both. We don't know what the secret is, but there's several teams that have just opted out on Brandon Boykin. We always thought it was maybe the Chip Kelly thing, just how Chip Kelly's just dumping players out of there. Where they got rid of LaShawn McCoy, of course, that big trade, and Deshaun Jackson, and you just see it was like a mass exodus out of Philadelphia. So you thought when you were getting Brandon Boykin, you were actually getting something of value, and it turns out maybe that the Steelers were on the wrong end of that deal. So,
everyone was talking about he was going to be like the next star for the Steelers secondary. He was our savior. He was going to lead us to a Super Bowl, and I mean, it took him a while to play the field, and I know I was happy when he finally got in the field, and he played well, but he wasn't really exactly a difference maker for us. He just didn't make the same screw-ups that Antoine Blake was making with all the missed tackles and just getting fooled on the field, and who knows. His issue is, like, most teams see him as a slot cornerback, and originally he was, like, really kind of hoping he'd play on the outside, but I don't know if you noticed, he kind of tweeted when the Carolina Panthers waived him, #slot QB lives matter. So I'm pretty sure he's accepted his role at this point.
Yeah, I've seen that too. There's nothing wrong with being a slot corner. I mean, if you're getting on the field, I'm sure there are many players who would kill to be in the same exact opportunity, or have the same exact opportunity as Boykin had. And this guy is just kind of looks like he squandered it a few times. I thought personally he was going to hold the Steelers hostage for a lot of money, so I was surprised when he signed for such a little amount with the Panthers, and then doubly surprised when the Panthers dropped him. I thought, if anything, it was interesting because I tweeted something out to D'Angelo Williams and Mike Mitchell, who seem to do a lot of talking on Twitter, and they're always tweeting something, and on the edge of controversy, at least DW is. And Mike Mitchell actually responded back because I asked him what it was like to play for Mike Tomlin and Ron Rivera, and he said, they treat him like men, and they're the best coaches in the NFL in his opinion. Of course, those are the guys that primarily he played for, but it's just surprising that those same two coaches didn't think as highly of Brandon Boykin as perhaps all of us fans did. So, Eric, it's been a pleasure having you on this Memorial Day weekend. I hope the holiday is treating you well. I know you've got to get running. I've got to get running too. And I appreciate you once again taking the time out and being my first guest ever on the show, actually. So we'll see how this turns out. Hopefully the audio quality issues are okay. We had a little bit of noise, a little bit of breakdown, but it seems like we got it all figured out.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Joe. Hopefully sometime soon we can do this again.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation that me and Eric had. Eric, the first guest on the Steel City Underground podcast. Hope to have a few more for you here in the near future. In case you guys missed it, I am very, very happy. The Pens go up 1-0 in the Stanley Cup Finals. I know it's not football related, but it is Pittsburgh sports. And you see with Mike Tomlin, Antonio Brown, Brett Kiesel, and others that are always in attendance, these Pittsburgh sports guys, they really do stick together. And that'll just about wrap up today's show. Hope you enjoyed listening to me and Eric just talk Steelers. And I look forward to having Eric on the show again. Once again, a big thank you to Eric Herrmann over at Steelers Grind. You can find him on Twitter and SteelersGrind.com. Until then, be good, be safe, and I will catch you later, Steelers Nation.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.